All right, we are here to talk about day 2 in Luxor, Egypt. And this was probably one of my favorite days of the entire trip because we are going to talk about the Valley of the Kings and the Temple of
Hatshepsut.
Still can't say that, but yes. So we knew that one of the main reasons we were coming to Luxor was to see the Valley of the Kings. I personally knew nothing about this before we came. Austin researched it a ton. I think he watched every Egyptian documentary that he could find beforehand. So we had our own built-in tour guide, which was really nice.
Because I didn't want to pay for one.
And we didn't, and we didn't have to. So the Valley of the Kings, what I learned from my tour guide, the Valley of the Kings is a compilation of tombs for ancient pharaohs and kings of ancient Egypt. Mm-hmm. So these tombs are magnificent. I mean, they are intricate and beautiful, and I mean, there's just so much to look at. And they're so insanely well preserved. It's really mind-blowing.
Also well over 3,000 years old.
3,000 years old. And you see the paint on these walls, and you just think, like, our paint comes off our walls when we clean it, you know? So I want whatever paint they used. But the first tomb that we saw was Ramses VI. I think it was that moment when we actually stepped into the tomb, and I saw all the hieroglyphics, all the paintings, all the carvings, the different rooms and compartments, that I realized that this is why we came to Egypt, to be able to get this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really experience this piece of history.
So the Valley of the Kings does their ticketing a little weird. So they have a general admission, which is good for only 3 tombs, which they did not make clear at all, by the way. They just like go stamping your ticket as you go into random tombs. So that's nice to know.
Choose wisely.
You get 3. And they also have additional tickets for specific tombs. So Ramses VI was one of those additional tickets. So it costs another £50 to go into Ramses VI tomb, which I had heard was one of the best tombs. And it was, absolutely. I would say it's worth it because it was £50, which is like 30 cents. It's like $3. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, not 30 cents. $3. So I think $3 is worth it to see one of the best tombs in the Valley of the Kings. And it was also nice because since it was an extra ticket, no one else wanted to buy it. We were in there by ourselves, and
for a good little while.
And the one guy they have somebody at every tomb that stamped your ticket, but him and us, and that was it. And it was pretty cool to just be in there alone, just being able to experience it.
Yeah, it almost felt like a reverent experience. I don't know. You didn't think so. But it was so cool. It was so cool. And obviously, that was someone's tomb. So, not that his body was in there anymore. But
nope. Shipped it off to Cairo.
That's right. Yeah, most of the mummies, most of the bodies are in Cairo.
Yep.
With the exception of King Tut, who was also buried and still at the Valley of the Kings.
His tomb is also extra.
Much extra. So
it's $10.
Oh. Do you see how cheap we are?
$10 per person.
We decided not to go to his tomb.
Well, it wasn't just because it was $10. The $10 would have been okay if it was also a fantastic tomb. King Tut's tomb itself was untouched, as most people know, because it was discovered in the 20s by a British explorer, Carter, I believe his name was. Mm-hmm. And so all of his stuff was in his tomb, still there, pretty much untouched. But the tomb itself is actually pretty small and it's one of the smallest tombs on display, actually. And the paint is kind of wearing. Scientists think is because it was painted really quickly and not that paint didn't have time to dry before they sealed it up. So it's not the most magnificent tomb. And from what I've heard, people were kind of underwhelmed, I guess, when comparing the other tombs, I should say. It still is a good tomb from what I've heard, but I would say not worth the $10 extra when we're already seeing all these other amazing tombs. But that's my own opinion. You can make your own choice.
And it certainly wasn't as crowded as I think it typically is in a busier season. There was a good amount of people there, but we were able to be in several tombs just by ourselves, which I think is a very rare occurrence. So that was nice. And the other nice thing is that even though the Valley of the Kings is obviously very exposed to the sun, there's no shade there. But when you go into the tombs, you're not exposed to the sun. So it's nice because you do get frequent breaks from the heat. And because Egypt is a dry heat, being in shade makes all the difference. So that excursion was much more bearable than the day before. And maybe we were just getting used to the heat a little bit too, but that was a really incredible experience. So if you go to Egypt, you got to do it. You got to go to Luxor to do it. So the other crazy thing, so the Valley of the Kings is on the west bank of the Nile River. So there's several sites to see on the west bank. Where we were staying was on the east bank, so we kind of made a special trip out to the west bank. Mm-hmm. On our way to the West Bank, our driver was pointing out some different things, and he pointed out like these two massive statues. Is that what you call them? But they're
Colossus
like
in Memnon.
The what?
The Colossus at Memnon, I think it's called.
Okay, but they're like 5 stories tall.
Easily.
I mean,
they're Colossus.
Right. They're huge. And he just said casually, yeah, those were discovered 2 years ago in that field over there.
Oh, no, that wasn't the Colossus in Memnon.
Oh, well, that's what
that was something else. Those are the Ramses statues.
So as we were driving to the Valley of the Kings, our driver was pointing out different things on the road, and he pointed out these 2 big statues, which were...
I think they were Ramses II?
And when I say big, they were like 5 stories tall.
Yeah.
Big.
They were incredible. Like
as tall as buildings. And he just casually says, yeah, those 2 over there were just found 2 years ago in that field.
Just in a field. That's the thing about Egypt is like you can literally trip over 3,000-year-old history. It's just a common occurrence. I mean, it's one of the most impressive ancient civilizations. I've always really admired ancient Egypt, and I think it's a very interesting story. So it's one of the reasons I wanted to come here, because just to experience the incredibly rich culture. I mean, if you look at ancient Egyptian architecture and artistic stylings, like you'll see it ripple through Rome and Greece, and like they very much were influenced by Egyptians. I mean, Alexander the Great himself called himself a pharaoh because he admired Egypt so much.
Right. Well, and that's the thing about Egypt too, is again going back to what I was saying, is it still feels very tied to its ancient roots. Mm-hmm. So right next to these ancient temples You have buildings that people are living in that look kind of ancient themselves too.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It feels, like I said earlier, a kind of a transcendent experience because they're so tied to the ancient ways. Like as we were driving to the West Bank, you see people literally like harvesting the fields by hand, and
Just like two guys.
yeah, literally just
Yeah.
with a sickle, like working the fields, and then you see like this village of mud brick homes,
Right.
which is what they've been living in for thousands of years, and it's just
And kids
it's
driving
astounding.
the donkey carts with all the crops in the back. And
Right. And of course, it's mixed with modern technology. You know, you see the motorcycles and the cars. It's not like it's completely primitive or anything, but it's just the style of life is very much tied to its ancient roots, I would say.
Yeah, which is really interesting and not something I was totally expecting, but it is very interesting. So also on the West Bank of the Nile is the Temple of Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut.
There you go.
Close.
So we went and did that. At this point, it was getting closer to noon, and let me just say,
It's like 11.
Oh yeah, but
It's not
you feel like Rocky going up all those steps. Okay, so just keep that in mind.
The Temple of Hatshepsut has 3 tiers to it, so it's like 3 stories up, and it's a long 3 stories.
It's beautiful.
It was amazing. It's this beautiful temple. It's carved into the side of the mountains by Queen Hatshepsut, actually. She was the first queen pharaoh, basically.
So it was really impressive, really beautiful. I probably would have appreciated it more if I had done it in the morning when it wasn't so hot. But still very cool. And if you're over on the West Bank anyways, you might as well do it. That one was free?
No.
No, not free.
No.
Okay.
Not free. Also, make sure you keep in mind that all of these places only take cash. So,
Yeah.
Especially when you're going to the West Bank, you need to make sure you have all of the cash that you're going to need for all of those places, because it's not going to be easy to find cash once you get over to the West Bank, because you got to take a taxi. It's far outside of Luxor. You're not going back to the East Bank to get some cash and come back. So make sure you pack all your cash.
Right. Yeah, we were definitely expecting more of these tourist destinations to take cards, and they just don't.
Nope. None of the historical sites take cards. And I'd say at least half of the vendors don't either. So
Right.
it makes it a little more difficult, but it's workable.
Yeah. Overall, our time in Luxor was really, really fantastic. I knew nothing about Luxor before this trip, and I didn't even know that it existed, but I'm really grateful for this guy because we saw really incredible things that I would have been very sad to miss had we visited Egypt and not seen them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that researching Egyptian history, you know, I always had this misconception in my mind in school that like, oh, the pyramids is where all these elaborate tombs and cool stuff are, is where all the pharaohs, and like you think of like mazes around and stuff. I'd say the majority of the elaborate tombs are in the Valley of the Kings. Like the tombs in the pyramids themselves are pretty bare bones comparatively, and they have been ransacked beyond belief. So they have not been as well kept as the Valley of the Kings has been, because they've been sealed up and literally buried for millennia.
And if you're wondering how Sadie was through all of this, she was actually really fantastic.
She slept through the Valley of the Kings.
For the most part.
she was asleep most of the time in the Valley of the Kings, and she woke up for Hatshepsut, but
yeah.
she was good.
Austin just wore her in the carrier.
Yeah, so she didn't really run around.
No, so she didn't get tuckered out, but we just always kept water, kept her hydrated, lots of snacks. So, just eating her muffin in the
Yes.
Temple of Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut.
So, anyways, she did really great, and it's doable. You know, I know Egypt sounds pretty crazy to do with a toddler, but it is doable. Plus, we have a pretty awesome toddler. So,
All right. Thanks for watching.
And if you want to check out more of our video next week will be talking about Sharm el-Sheikh. We're going to go snorkeling, and we're going to stay at the Hilton Sharks Bay Resort.
bye.